what I mean.
Why do you want your own house?
So I could just be financially dependent, pick where I want to live.
Even if you're married?
Yeah, like I would probably buy a house before pursuing dating for marriage, yeah.
So what if, and then he would have his own house and you'd...
I guess from there we would figure it out. From there, if we wanted to sell the house or both live in the house, like I'd be fine moving a guy into my house, yeah.
And you would still own the house? Or you'd split the house with him? Or you'd transfer it to him?
I wouldn't transfer it to him. It would be my house for sure.
You would have separate finances?
I don't know about that, but in terms of like where I want to live, I'm 100% picking that on my own and getting my own house.
Okay. But
so if the man comes and goes...
So your bank accounts would go together, but you'd keep the house in your name?
If we're married, I guess we'd figure it out as we go, but I'd probably like date someone and then, I don't know, I just don't want to be dependent. I don't want to like
You don't
want
to be dependent. So right, exactly. You don't want to be dependent. So why get married?
Why get married?
Yeah, I could be independent. I could live on my own. I could hire a maid. I could hire a cook. I could just whatever, you know. I don't want to be independent. I want to be dependent on my wife. I love my wife. I want to make a vow that I'm going to stay with my wife forever and have a nice big family. And I don't want to be separated at all. I want to be one flesh with my wife. If I didn't want to do that, if I wanted to just be on my own but have someone to mitigate the loneliness and occasionally sleep with, why get married at all?
I do want to get married. I am going to eventually date to marry, I think. Like, my goal is to eventually start dating in like a year, date in under 3 months, get engaged, get married. I don't want to do the like multi-year dating and good. Like cohabitating before. I think that's a joke. I think it's a waste of time.
But why do it?
I'm also cognizant of the fact that men today are a joke, and there's a 1 in 4 chance that your husband's going to commit infidelity, and I don't believe in necessarily like pursuing
There are things you can do to mitigate those stats, though.
Mitigating infidelity on my husband's part? What? Being a fucking blow doll for him?
No, I wouldn't recommend that either. No, the things you could do is marry men who, for instance, don't recognize the sacramental reality of divorce. Just to use one example.
That's not what I said. I said infidelity.
Or who recognize that infidelity is
every man I've ever dated has been Christian conservative, and at least one of them I found an Oculus in his closet where he's watching VR porn. In my experience, like I said, at the macro level, it's usually these Christian conservatives who are the most porn addicted, and at a micro level, these men I'm dating.
You date a lot of these Christian conservatives. Well, there's something about them that attracts you.
Well, I'm waiting till marriage.
Good. Oh, good. So you don't... Okay. Well, look, I think that's fabulous. Mm-hmm. And I love that you as a feminist are very attracted to Christian conservative men. I think that's good for society broadly. It's bad that these guys are like looking at porn or whatever. I don't know that necessarily implies that once they get married, they would either continue to do that or would step out on you and cheat and have an affair or whatever. It does seem to me, though, that certain groups of men are less likely than others to sleep with other women. And so... You know, if you want to have that good, stable life and maybe overcome your fears of being dependent on someone who might be a total loser, then you might want to make sure you don't pick a total loser.
But even stepping out aside, I mean, I gave you those stats about correlation between religious men and pornography consumption and prostitution purchasing. So, how can you say that?
Some people who are broadly religious of some sect or other do that, and all people are tempted by things. But I don't think that we can just throw our hands in the air and fall into a kind of romantic quietism and say, well, they're all just these men are all dogs, they're all cads. No, actually, some men are more inclined to virtue than others, and that might, if you.
But based off the stats, it would seem the religious men are less inclined to virtue.
No,
they're
not
watching porn and buying sex.
That's ridiculous. You're telling me that
but I gave
Christian
you the
men are more like. No. You gave me a stat and said, certain red states with certain religious groups consume certain kinds of porn or whatever. But
the more Christians are in a state, the more pornography consumption and surges there are in prostitution purchases. Yes.
It would seem that perhaps there are other factors at play there.
Like
when you're talking about a full state. I don't know. When you're talking about class, income, when you're talking about education, when you're talking about family formation in the first place, when you're talking, for goodness sakes, when you're talking about geography, we're talking about whole states here, and you're pulling one variable out and saying, see, there it is, the correlation is the causation. That's crazy. You were cut. It's okay. You can cut me off. That's fine. My only question to you is, you're saying that the thing that is preventing you from wanting to be codependent on a man, actually engage in this marriage, totally giving yourself
is because I've become disillusioned with the state of tradcons, and I think they're a hoax.
No, you don't think it's true. You're picking on tradcons because you think that they're your ideological opponents. I don't think they are.
I don't think so. But if that was the case, I wouldn't date them.
I think that if one identifies as a liberal feminist, then necessarily tradcons are your ideological foes.
I completely disagree.
But I agree.
I think they have very similar perceptions of hookup culture and a lot of things, depending on the sect of feminism I am. I actually find way more common ground with conservative men than liberal men.
That's fabulous. But you think they're not living up to it. Okay, well then, find...
I think they overcorrect. They will vouch that they don't watch porn. They're going to be like, you know what I mean? The more they talk about how disgusted they are by porn, the more likely I am to find out that it turns out that they are watching porn. Like I said, I found that at like the micro anecdotal level of my dating life, and then also at the macro level just based on statistics.
Wait, you object to your partner watching pornography?
It wouldn't be ideal, yes.
But my understanding is you don't do any nudity in your OnlyFans content, but you...
Wait, you have an OnlyFans too?
Yeah, she doesn't.
What?
OnlyFans.
Are you kidding me? I've been... Oh, man, I thought you strung me along so well, and now you're going to pull the rug out. Hold on. You're the one who's trying to entice these men to look at this stuff. And then you're trying to put all of the blame on them?
My OnlyFans I started a year ago. I'm talking about, this is why I became disillusioned and pink-pilled, is because I did everything right. I was a virgin all through college. I'm still a virgin. I do all these things. I date these Christian conservatives. They talk about waiting till marriage. They talk about going to church every Sunday.
Yeah.
Porn addicts, all of them.
Yeah. No, look, I don't doubt that porn addiction is totally prevalent.
And if they're not watching porn, they're following Instagram models. They're going to Hooters. It's mostly conservative men. Conservative men that I'd go on dates with. They'd have these like posters of like nude playgirls and stuff like that, like Playboy bunnies and stuff. And that's usually
Are you dating like 65-year-old men? What are you talking about, Playboy?
It's more of these conservative like Midwestern boys who like have that type of paraphernalia.
Yeah,
that's
I don't know.
more.
Hold on. Now, are we talking about?
Native to their
are we
culture.
talking about like a pinup thing in your garage from the 40s, or are we talking about like actual porn addiction where people are?
It doesn't matter.
Looking at
To
your
me,
content.
it's all the same. I'm just saying that like why is going to Hooters more acceptable? Why can't I throw my chips in?
Wait, one question. So, but you do make OnlyFans content. So I guess how do you reconcile that with objecting to your partner watching that sort of content, but you also produce that kind of content? I don't necessarily. Well, go ahead.
I mean, I just think it's funny because always on these red pill shows, men will get on here and be like, yes, I watch porn, but I wouldn't date a porn star. So what's the issue?
And you're saying I do porn, but I wouldn't date a guy who watches it.
Yes, because I'll tell you why. If you actually look at pair bonding, watching porn does affect your neurochemistry and your pair bonding. Me being lusted after does not affect my neurochemistry or my pair bonding.
But you're enticing them to do it. Like I'm maybe the least judgmental person on the right when it comes to this stuff because all sin and fall short of the glory of God. But you are part of the problem, and the thing that you're inveighing against is something that you are encouraging and profiting from as you encourage it.
That's only if you consider lusting to only exist within pornography. I think even if my boyfriend were lusting after like 18-year-olds, like a cashier at a grocery store, I would think that's just as wrong as
lust
watching
is
pornography.
Bad. Yeah. And pornography
no, I'm not
encourages
enticing
and
them.
inflames
Same
lust.
way, even if I didn't do pornography and I was just an attractive woman, that doesn't mean I'm enticing men by putting on makeup every day. It's up to them to not lust after.
Putting on a little bit of rouge is going to be less exciting to a man than doing pornography.
I don't know if you've heard JP talk about it. He says women put on blush to simulate sexual orgasm in their face. And
actually,
that's also
if you want to
very
get into
sexualized.
female cosmetic coalitions, there's a very interesting anthropological point to that very thing you've just said. But clearly there are gradations also. A 1940s pinup poster and hardcore porn on the internet, one is going to excite one more than the other.
Yes, and if we're talking gradations, and where I fall in those gradations is probably on the more mild side. I don't do nuded content, but
you don't do nude content? What is OnlyFans? I thought OnlyFans was porn.
Nude content if anyone wants to check it out.
You can post whatever you want. Cardi B just gets on there and yaps and is one of the top 10 creators. But I mean, regardless, like I said, even if I did do nude content, even if I did necessarily like touch myself on camera, that doesn't affect my neurochemistry in terms of pair bonding. But a man watching that, yes,
you're doing something bad to these men and then complaining that the men are bad.
Well, that doesn't follow, because if I wore a bikini and went to the beach, that doesn't mean that it's my fault. Then if my boyfriend checks out women and just stares at them on the beach, like I'm not responsible
I think women
for
should be more
his
modest
inordinate
on the
amount
beach,
of
actually.
lust.
Yeah, I do. I do think they should.
I don't think most people would subscribe to that. I don't think most people would say that if I wear a bikini on the beach, that means I'm a hypocrite. If I say I don't want my boyfriend just ogling women at the beach all the time, and I think that would make an improper partner.
You're not really complaining about men who go to the beach and maybe take a little gander down the shore. You are specifically complaining about men who look at pornography.
No,
and
I didn't.
Right
no, I didn't. That's why I brought up VS Angel shows. That's why I brought up Hooters. That's why I brought up the posters.
Victoria's Secret.
Why would I bring up all these things if the threshold for me was just pornography? That's why I walked it back and said all these other things.
Okay, you did walk it back and included these other things, which I think are totally legitimate. But there are plenty of things that I think are bad, and plenty of sins that I fall into, like all the time, right? But I don't complain about them being bad while actively promoting them. There's no cognitive dissonance there?
No, I think it's bad if you're in a relationship and you're lying to your partner and saying, I don't watch porn, and then you do it. And then you consume it. That doesn't mean
That's also bad.
That doesn't mean I think watching porn is morally bad on its own. If I'm saying I don't want that, that's why same reason I said I don't think necessarily dating women is bad. But if I was married to a man, then yes, I would say him dating other women is bad. Doesn't mean I'm condemning dating in general.
So you're coming back to the same thing that you said about abortion, which is I would never do it, but I'm not going to say it's wrong.
No, I think once you're in a relationship, there are certain activities that you should not do.
Because
such as dating other women. So
what if your partner says that it's okay to do that?
What do you mean? I would find someone who has moral congruence to me.
Right, but you're saying if you're in a relationship, you shouldn't date other women. But what if, not you, but some guy were dating some girl, and dating you? You really? Oh no. And you would say, okay, it's fine if you date other women. Would you say that's then you would say in that relationship it is fine to sleep with other women, or no?
Like, are you asking me? Do I have objective moral guidelines for what dating should look like?
Yeah.
I think if your goal is to have the most optimal marriage, there's lots of things you should not do, such as I think you should have a low body count if you want to optimize, longevity of marriage. I don't think you should watch porn. At the same time, I don't like that it stops at just those two things. Like, I think those are just the two things we use to shame women and try to force them into modesty. But there's other things, for instance, like you shouldn't even cohabitate with your boyfriend before marriage, even if you're not sleeping together, if you technically want to increase your chances of longevity.
Why not?
And even once
why shouldn't you cohabitate?
It's not about shouldn't. I'm saying it more.
Why would you discourage cohabitating?
It's not about discouraging. That's why I'm saying I'm not moralizing it.
Whatever you just said about cohabitating, why are you saying?
If your aim is to have the longest, most healthiest, most happiest marriage possible, statistically speaking, not having previous sexual partners, not living together before marriage will optimize those things. That doesn't mean I'm moralizing it. Same way again, if you're married.
Why with cohabitating? Because it's an important point on what we were just talking about.
You desensitize, you kind of shore up on wifely duties before actually getting wifed. It gives the guy this incentive where he doesn't have to, buy the cow because he's getting the milk for free, all that bullshit. But that actually pans out statistically. But my point is, we talk...
And because it's enticing, right? Because it's tempting. You're not going to cohabitate and not sleep together.
That's not true.
You think you could cohabitate and not sleep together?
I've done it, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Was the man a homosexual?
Are you saying he's going to transgress my barriers if I'm like, don't fuck me?
No, I think he would find it... I think he would move out before he would deal with that.
Regardless, I'm just saying there are certain things that will optimize your marriage. For instance, even once you're married, if you guys don't sleep in the same bed, that will actually lead to a stronger marriage. That doesn't mean I necessarily prescribe it. It just depends. What are these variables that you want to add into your relationship to strengthen it? So it's not necessarily that I would say a guy shouldn't necessarily watch porn if his girlfriend's okay with it. Same way, again, technically I wouldn't prescribe don't sleep in the same bed together, even though that could also disaffect your marriage.
You've come to so many of the right moral conclusions, but you just don't want to take credit for them. You don't want to say that they're true. You just want to say that you just accidentally you've come to the right conclusions.
Let me ask you this. You probably prescribe that people don't have premarital sex, right?
Yeah, I would
Were you a
strongly
virgin until marriage?
It. No, I was an atheist for 10 years. I did a lot of naughty things.
Okay, and you would probably prescribe that people don't watch pornography in marriage?
Yes.
And the reason being that would disaffect your chances of marital success and happiness?
No, I don't, as we were talking about earlier on ethics, I don't view ethics from the perspective of consequences.
But you also said what's true is typically what's good, so they're kind of hand in hand. That's what you said earlier.
But I don't consider means in light of ends. I don't think that good ends would justify immoral means. What I'm saying is that actions are good or bad depending on the actions, and more importantly, actually, on the character of virtue of the person who is acting in them. So the way that I would ascertain what's good or bad is according to virtue, not according to some weird calculation of like statistics say I'm going to be married longer or whatever.
Well, final thought from the both of you on this. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, statistically speaking, couples are happier together when they don't sleep in the same bed. Would you not prescribe that then, because there's no virtue tied to it? That's more.
No. There's a lot of virtue tied to modesty and restraint and waiting until marriage.
No. That's not what I meant. Even once you're married, you'll have a more successful marriage, statistically speaking, if you don't sleep in the same bed as your partner.
It's very aristocratic. I'm too middle class to do that, but. But yeah, the aristocratic classes sleep in different beds.
I guess my point was that people pick and choose what level of pair bonding they want to create with their partner, whether it's not watching pornography, having premarital sex, and then not sleeping in the same bed.
I'm skeptical that you actually have more marital satisfaction if you don't sleep in the same bed. But the British royals have been doing it for a long time, and they all cheat on each other, I guess. So
right. I guess what I was trying to outline is just that there's a lot of different
I am going to have to move it on. We have Seaberg here. No wage gap. It's an earnings gap. The 77 cents to the dollar stat is a labor stat that took total earnings by each segment sex. Divided by total workers, feminism tends to look only until proof of victimhood is found. Hey, Seberg, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Actually, and to come back to my point I was actually trying to make earlier, asking all of you if you would prefer a man to pay on the first date. Couldn't it be the case, I mean, even if we remove the fact that, for example, men tend to work more hours, they're more likely to relocate for work, they're more likely to work hazardous jobs, and there's a whole bunch of other variables. Given the answers that you provided to my question about if you would prefer a man to pay for the first date, let's assume that somewhere between 30 to 50% of women also hold that. It might be more. Couldn't it be fair to say that just on that sole thing, the sole thing that women prefer men to be providers or prefer men to pay on that first date, wouldn't that be enough of a mating pressure, of a mating force to be a stronger motivating factor for men to occupy higher positions of higher status, positions that pay more money? Whereas women don't have that corresponding mating pressure, men are really not putting a pressure on women to pay for first dates, for example.
What is it? That's certainly possible. The problem that I think most feminists would point out is that when it does come to the women who are putting that self-pressure, whatever, performing highly, trying to get like that next pay raise, promotion, when it comes to studies that do like double blind, who try to like account for other factors, they're still not being picked because of gender bias. That's a problem. It's not necessarily that men want to get these higher positions of power. To me, that's not a problem. What's a problem is that if we start making all things equal, women are still being punished for it, then that's weird to me. It's
very difficult to make all things equal. So even when you drill down, and I'll just take those statistics for what they're worth, still, if you have a society that gives an advantage to women, as a matter of, say, affirmative action or some DEI policy, and that begins very early on. It begins in high school, and then it goes on to college, and then maybe you get a little bonus on your SAT, and then maybe you get into the medical school because we want more women. They're underrepresented in the field, and then maybe the firm looks at you or the medical office and says, well, I don't know that this woman, she graduated college, but she didn't graduate as good a college as this man, or she did graduate the same college as the man, but I don't know that she really deserved it. I'm not saying that's just exactly, but I think they are at least justified in that prejudice, because we got a whole system right now that says that if you're a woman, you get bonus points. And this is Clarence Thomas has written about this extensively. He says, I had a trouble getting a job after graduating Yale Law School. Yale Law School is the best school in the country. I'm Clarence Thomas. I'm like one of the greatest judges in American history. But he couldn't do it because he was black, and they assumed he was an affirmative action case.